You're listening to Unfiltered with Muhammad Uncut, a podcast about personal growth and authentic leadership. If you're looking for tips on how to manage others, get ahead, and make your way up the corporate ladder, this is not the show for you. This podcast is about being of service to others, leading from the heart, and evolving into a better version of yourself. Each episode brings you motivated stories about unfiltered leadership and authentic leaders, those who involve others, use their influence to amplify diverse perspectives, and inspire teams to achieve collective results. If this sounds like you, keep listening. Welcome to the Unfiltered podcast. Unfiltered is the podcast for leaders who involve others, use their influence to help them rise and inspire them to become better versions of themselves. The Unfiltered podcast showcases leaders who lead from the heart to make a positive change. Good afternoon to my guest this afternoon, Shakeel Bharmal, who is making a positive change every day with the people that he works with, the people that he inspires, and the people that he serves, because this is why we're here today. We're here to talk about unfiltered leadership. In your own words, can you tell us who you are and what inspires you every single day?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I always love speaking to you, Mohammed. Look, I've had a number of years of corporate experience, large organization experience. But, you know, as I've been in business, there's been an underlying nature of mine that's always been wanting to be in the helping professions. So while I've been a business leader, a general manager, a director, a COO, that was really all a front for me. It was a front for me to find a vehicle to help others achieve their full potential, to help others find their authenticity and their courage and be everything that they can be and want to be in their life. So that's what motivates me. That's what drives me. And so after years of being in the corporate sector in leadership roles, I have decided to do that for a living now and focus just on helping people make an impact in their organizations, with their teams, in their lives, and in their communities. So that's who I am, and that's what I do.
Well, welcome, and I'm sure you do it really well, and we're going to learn all about that today. So to help our listeners, can you give us a bit of background? A lot of people think that leadership is this feeling that, you know, we get all of a sudden and we think, hey, you know, I want to become a leadership consultant, or I want to help people become a leader in their community or in their workplace. Help me understand, was this an overnight transformation? Was this an ongoing process for you? What prompted you to recognize that you want to help people develop their leadership acumen?
Yeah, you know, it has been a journey. You know, part of what I said is in my leadership career, I always enjoyed helping people. You know, I always used to have these conversations with my employees, my team, and say, okay, I'm taking off the company hat now, and I just want to talk to you about you. And I found myself taking off my company hat a lot. And that was a signal to me that I was getting so much more joy and value in talking to the individual about themselves. And then, of course, I put the company hat back on so that we could have a conversation about everything we talked about in the context of impacting the organization. And so I realized that I really enjoyed that, and I found ways to do that. And so here's, you know, the visual that motivates me. I believe that everybody, all of us in this world, have a desire and all have an ability to make an impact on the world around us. And the visual I think of is the ability to throw a pebble into a body of water. You throw a pebble into a body of water, it creates ripples. So we all have the ability to create these ripples. These ripples are the impact our actions, our behaviors, our attitudes have on other people. Now, those ripples can be positive or those ripples can be negative. I believe that people want to make a positive impact. But at the same time, life is complicated, right? The degree of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity in the world today is unprecedented, and it's only getting more so. So when you have volatile bodies of water with rocky waves, it's kind of hard to create ripples when you throw a pebble in. But I still know that people want to do that. So I view my role as helping leaders, individuals, and teams kind of navigate these periods of rocky waters to still make an impact, even though the water is not smooth, to still create the ripples in some way or another. And that visual just keeps me kind of motivated, and gives me direction on kind of my role in the world.
And I'm going with the visual here because I can see myself getting really impassioned, and there are these waves that are just throwing me in every direction. There's this undercurrent that's taking me yet in another direction, and you never really have any sure footing. And it's not until you get to some sort of peaceful place within this ocean of knowing and self-knowing and knowing of others that you're able to see the impact that the ripples are making, right? And so I guess that kind of begs the question, because we can continue with this visual, which is really powerful.
Yeah.
But if we take this visual and apply it to your definition of leadership, how would you define leadership?
Yeah, well, you did a great job setting the stage a little bit there, where you talked about the undercurrents and the pushes and the pulls. Because it's so complicated out there, it's easy to get kind of distracted or pulled in other directions. So when I think of leadership, I think first and foremost, the importance of self-knowing, the importance of understanding who you are, what gives you energy, where are your strengths, where are your talents, where are your blind spots. And if you can know yourself really well, then you're not as much a victim to to keep the analogy going, what the forces, the water, the push and the pull, they will influence you less. You'll be much more on firm footing because you know yourself really well. So if you know what your strengths are, you know what to continue to work on to get even better. If you know what your gaps are, you know what kind of people you need to help you in moments of trouble, in moments where you're facing a challenge where you're not an expert. So to me, leadership is first of all self-knowing, self-awareness, understanding yourself. Next is, for me, is a drive to learn. So even though you might be strong at something, it's both a drive and an awareness on how to learn, how to unlearn, how to relearn. And third is the ability to be authentic and vulnerable in order to ask for the help you need when you need it. There's many different things that go into leadership. To me, those are the three most important. Not the only ones, but to me, the three most important.
Well, it sounds like you have developed some sort of expertise where you find a comfort level to understand what leadership means to you and how you can impact others, right? And I'm thinking earlier to what you said about putting the hat on and putting the hat off. And your definition of leadership is not putting your hat on and putting your hat off. Right. So, leadership isn't anything that somebody bequeaths to us and says, Shakeel, you are becoming a leader today, right? I don't even think it's something that we put on a hat and wake up one day and say, I am a leader today, right? So with this idea of, I want to go back to what you said of putting the hat on, putting the hat off. And to me, I could feel the undercurrents pulling you under when you had the hat on. Yeah. And in order for you to kind of understand where the ripples were going, you had to take the hat off. Can you explain to me why the struggle between putting a hat on and hat off when you were working in the corporate world? What did that signify?
So can I give you a specific example?
Love that.
So I remember maybe 12 years ago, I was a director of sales and marketing at a large company. And I had a particular employee who was a manager of analytics. And he really wanted to get promoted. And every time we did a performance review, he would come to me to make a case to get promoted. And I was doing his performance review. So I was telling him where his gaps were. And I was giving him the context of the organization that would not really support his advancement to the next level. Now, I didn't want him to leave. He was excellent. He was a valued employee. He had tremendous ability and analytical skill that was good for the organization. But one day, another friend of mine was a leader in another organization, called me and said, hey, do you know anybody that's good at this? I'm looking for a person in this role. And I, for a moment, said, as much as I value this person, as much as we need him here in this organization, I thought that it would be worthwhile him exploring that other role. So when I spoke to him and brought him into my office, I felt like I had to take my company hat off, because with my company hat on, I felt it was irresponsible to encourage him to go elsewhere
Right.
when he was a valued employee. So I took it off and told him, here's what I'm thinking. You were looking for promotion. It's not coming. There is this other job I've become aware of. I do not want you to leave. It's not good for the company for you to leave. But I think you should explore it. And maybe you'll discover it's not right for you, in which case you'll say, maybe I'm happy staying at this company without a promotion. Or you'll discover there's another path. So that would be an example of a situation where I felt I had to take, because sometimes you're at conflict, right?
Right.
In your loyalty to the company and in your loyalty to your people.
And I'm going to play devil's advocate here. It almost feels like we're in conflict with traditional leadership styles, and where I hope that we're moving towards in this, maybe in the past 10 to 15 years, there's more awakened, embracing our vulnerability, seeking out our authenticity, as you said earlier, right? So I see now leadership is embracing the emotional intelligence aspect that we saw first more with the female gender. And, you know, men in leadership roles, and more men, 98% of leaders tend to be men, dominant, white-haired, white men in very powerful roles, calling the shots. And that's kind of what leadership looked like. You went and sat around a table, and you looked like the other people at that table. You shared their gender, you shared their language, you shared their ethnicity, and there wasn't a lot of diversity there. And so I hear you, and I feel like, you know, the taking the hat off and taking the hat on is also a struggle or a conflict between traditional leadership styles, where it's about what's in it for me, how can I advance my own agenda, talk about leadership from the point of view of it's a, you know, it's a command and like it's a role based, it's I tell you what to do and you do it, right? As opposed to what's in it for me that I can help you figure out what's in it for you. Having that discussion with your employee wasn't the best decision necessarily for the company. You could have kept him in that position, doing a good job, subject matter expert, paying him less money, but you were thinking of what's the best decision for that employee. I bet you that employee looks back now and thinks, not that you did him a favor, you kind of did, but he respects you. He sees you as a leader. Right?
Well, I like to think so. I mean, to me, I think my life, I look back on my life and it's a collection of people I've impacted. And I get great joy from the specific instances and people. So I hope so. But, you know, you've made a really good point there about historically what was considered strong leadership and what it is now. And I think we're living in an excellent time right now where there's been a recognition that sometimes those people that had more empathetic styles, more nurturing styles, more employee-centric styles, who may have felt at conflict with the way success was defined as a leader in the past, this is their time. This is their time now.
Absolutely. You know, and I think what we're going through because of COVID, and we're not out of the woods just yet, it's in part because of where we allowed ourselves to go. You know, I don't think this disease just came out of the blue, right? This virus is here it came for a reason, but also, you know, I mean, there are many viruses in our communities. I talked about racism being a virus, privilege being a virus, right? And so we've allowed ourselves to do damage to the earth to the point where the earth needed to reset, and it did, and it has, and it will be.
Absolutely.
Right? And we don't want to talk about going back to an old normal or even building a facade of a new normal based on old pretexts and values that are no longer the values we should embrace, right? I think the behaviors we need to look at are behaviors of building equity and equality within organizations and communities. And, you know, again, when I look at how you define leadership, because you started with that self-knowing, and it always comes back to that. I want to later go down the path of asking you to explain to me the Buddha in you, right? I want to come to that in a moment.
Sure.
But then you took me down this path of leadership is also about the ripple effect, and it's about impact, not just influence. Influence sometimes means that we're somehow asking you not to see clearly. When you're under the influence, you're not necessarily seeing with clarity. But when you're impacting others, I think you're helping them understand their own influence.
Yes.
But then you took me to this place of vulnerability and authenticity. And I know that it can sound like a broken record because you read any book today, you pick up a Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, they're talking about vulnerability, dare to be vulnerable and embrace the courage and vulnerability. Every, newish author, every newish podcast, it just seems to be the trend. And I say that's good.
Yeah.
Because if we talk about it enough, it will become our new reality. It'll become our new diction. Right?
We have to keep talking about it because, I don't know if people have heard about the knowing doing gap. There's lots of things that we know are right, but we don't necessarily do them. We know it's right to eat healthy. We know it's right to drink 8 glasses of water a day. We know it's right to get exercise, but do we all do it? Do we do it as much as we should? And so it's the same thing with vulnerability and authenticity and empathy and EQ and all these things. We know it's being pointed to us how important it is. But if we're so embedded in our past practice or the practices of the leaders whose examples we have learned from, we don't necessarily do it. And so I think the more we talk about it, the more it'll expose the opportunities to do it more and to practice it more. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. To go back to your water analogy there, right now, what remind me again, it was the doing. What was the
knowing doing gap.
The knowing doing gap. So
I know it's good, but I don't do it.
Exactly. So I know that there's a stream of water that is going down its path in a certain way because that's how it's naturally going to maneuver and navigate. And that's what we do is we just go wherever the path is leading us. We know sometimes it's a little more difficult to go uphill. We know that doing what we think is impossible or more difficult, it's the least path of resistance that we end up taking. But that ripple effect, notice the ripple effect, those ripples aren't touching.
Yeah.
They are impacting, right?
Yeah.
When you throw that rock in water, the ripple effect is having an impact that is exponential and going out. The closer you are to it, the more you feel like the epicenter, you're feeling that ripple.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I want to ask you here, was there any one particular event or person that impacted you through this ripple effect that made you go down the path that you're going down right now?
Yeah, I've been influenced by so many people. It's so hard to pick one. But if I was to say the path I'm on now, there's 2 people I would say, and one of them was when I was thinking about what I wanted to do next. Right, I was working in a nonprofit organization as a COO, and I knew my time was coming to an end. I'd finished my mandate. And I was trying to think about what brought me joy. So I looked at some of my old assessments that I'd done in the past. And one of the things that was there was, teacher. That was one of the things I really got joy in. And I was sitting in my son's open house at his high school. And there's a really incredible teacher there who clearly got joy. And I said, I want that. So I started talking to people about what it would mean to develop a career in adult education. And I went to go see a gentleman who was an executive at an organization, a learning and development organization. And I told him what I was doing, who I was, what I wanted to do. And I was very grateful that individual said, I think you'd be a great teacher, but I also think you'd be a fantastic coach. And so my suggestion is go become a coach, get certified in being a coach, because if you were a coach, I'd hire you to teach. But if you're a teacher, I wouldn't necessarily hire you to coach. So I would say that was a big move, right? A ripple that was created because that got me to go and investigate coaching programs, which is the beginning step of my journey to becoming a coach. The next would be within my coaching program, there was one of my colleagues, one of my classmates, who was already an experienced seasoned coach. He was here to get another level of certification. We had an exercise where we were working on motivation, capability, motivation, understanding our motivation to find our purpose. And he asked me a couple of questions to get me to express what brought me joy, what brought me energy. And I started explaining to him, the thing that brings me the greatest joy is when I make an impact on a person and then I witness that person making an impact on another person.
Ripple.
The ripple. And as I was describing it, I was doing this with my hands. And that person said to me, he goes, "Do you see what you're doing right now?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You're making a ripple with your hands." And when he said that, it like the synapses fired and the dots connected. And I saw my life flash before my eyes. And I knew in that moment, that was my vision. That was my image. And in fact, that became the logo for my company.
You're reading my mind. So I guess that's where you got the inspiration for it from.
It really was that conversation. So those are just two of, I would say, probably a dozen people in my life that have set me on paths. And these are just the two most recent examples.
So I guess one of the things I'm hearing here, if you're going to be an effective teacher that's going to make an impact and help cause ripples in your students' life, you need to have a certain level of leadership to make that impact.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to be a coach that's going to make a ripple impact in the person you're coaching, you're going to have some leadership skills and capabilities. So define for me a good coach. I know we can talk about the different assessments, EQ assessments, personality, whatever you want to call them. But I think it comes back to the style of a coach. What are 3 things that you could define a great coach by?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about it in the way you're asking the question. So let me kind of dig deep a little bit and to think about my practice. I think there's a combination of soft things and actual practical skills. So from a soft side is you really need to be 100% focused on the needs of the other person. You're not a coach because you almost have to let go of the idea that I'm here as a coach to fulfill my purpose. No, it's not about you. It's about the other person. So I would say number one is whenever I'm in a coaching session, I have to take a moment to realize I'm a coach here, not to fulfill my purpose, but I'm a coach here to help that person fulfill whatever challenge they're trying to overcome. So one is being very kind of client-centered. The next, that's a soft thing, a whole attitude mindset. From a hard skill, I think the ability, to be very analytical is important. As a coach, you have to see the whole person. You have to absorb all the information from the signals they're giving, both the things you can hear, the words, the tone of voice, and the things you can see, the look in their eyes, the facial expression, the body language. And in between those things, you have to be able to pick up on the things that aren't being seen or shown or said. And you have to be able to take that information, analyze it, and then come up with just the right question or the right confirmation to get that next level of discovery from the other person. So if I am noticing somebody that is, a little bit stressed, a little bit tense, is talking about something that's happening in their day, I have to decide whether I'm going to ask them a question like, tell me something that caused you stress today. Or I might choose to say, you seem a little agitated, which is not a question, it's an observation. Both of those will get some kind of reaction. And I don't know the answer now, but in the moment, you end up knowing which is the right way to go. Asking a question or making a statement to induce a reaction. And I think the next part of it is, and this is, I think you asked me for 3 things. I think the next part of it is to be ready to move with whatever you get, right? So let's say, for example, I call out somebody and I say, you seem a little agitated today. If that person does not like that observation, they might say, what do you mean? I'm not agitated.
They are now.
They are now, right? But you have to be able to take that and not be afraid or back down. Yeah, maybe you were wrong. In which case you say, you know what, I'm sorry. I might have been wrong. I interpreted something there. Or you actually might have been right. And the reason they're giving you a negative reaction is because you exposed something. Being
Hit
able
on
to
something
dance in the
tender.
moment, being able to dance in the moment is, I think, is a really important part of it.
Right.
Does that help? Those are three
It
things.
does. Yeah, it does. And and I'll tell you why it's so important to me, because I'm new in this coaching thing, right? And I talk a lot. And talking a lot means you're not listening enough. And so the conversation sometimes, in previous endeavors that I've been involved in, it's been focused on me and my interpretation. And so empathy it's seldom about you.
Yeah.
And then to practice compassion, it means that you have to cross the bridge and go to the other side and understand what that person is feeling and living in the moment.
Yeah.
And seldom can you make that observation and make it right if you're the one who's engaged in the talking, or if you're the one that's making that observation. So what I'm learning, not what I've learned, because I've got so much to learn, which is why we're doing this, right?
We're all learning.
We're learning. And I love that vulnerability that you talk about, I don't know, I didn't think about it that way. And I think that's part of our learning, is to recognize that in a community of learning, in a community of coaches, or in a community of leaders, it's okay to let your guard down and say, I don't know. Or today a client asked me this and I didn't know how to respond. Because if we're not going to be self-aware and admit maybe where our own gaps are, we're not going to be able to build that bridge with others and then move forward, right?
Absolutely. I can't remember who said this to me, but somebody once said to me, if you are a piece of fruit, the next stage after becoming ripe is becoming rotten. So you never want to be ripe. You never want to be ripe. So that's the way I think of it. Never think of myself as already achieving an end state. We're always learning. If we ever believe that we've gotten there, we've arrived, we know everything there is to know, guess what? The next stage is becoming rotten.
Right.
Which is essentially, I think, what is happening right now in leadership, is those leaders that are clinging to past practices, old views of leadership and old views of what their people need. And we can see that right now playing out in some elections in some parts of the world. Those leaders are on the verge of becoming rotten if they aren't already.
Right.
The leaders that succeed in the future are the ones that recognize, just because I was successful in the past, it doesn't mean I'll be successful in the future doing the exact same things. Because things are changing, times are changing, people are changing. So I always carry that image of the piece of fruit. If it's ever ripe, the next stage is being rotten. So you never want to be ripe.
So how can we provide the best service to clients? So if you're a coach and somebody's coming to you because you're the subject matter expert, but you may not have the answer, what is the answer?
Yeah. Well, or you might have the answer, but it would not serve them well for you to give them the answer. That doesn't help their journey. So I think the biggest thing you could do to help somebody, and again, it varies in every situation, but the thing I try to do in every circumstance is make sure I fully understand what the person is trying to accomplish. So I have a set of questions. I start off every kind of coaching engagement with a client. I always ask them is, what would you like to accomplish in the next 3 to 4 weeks? What would accomplishing those things do for you? What would not accomplishing them do to you? And if I can get them to articulate what they're trying to do, what is the upside of accomplishing that thing, and what is the downside if they don't, now I have a good picture of where they are. And then my job is basically, the fourth question is, how can I support you in that journey?
Right.
I've got to ask them, what can I do to help you? And then you go with whatever they give to you. In some cases, I'll say, it'll be a how-to thing. I need to know how to grow my business, or I need to know how to do my social media marketing. And other times it'll be, I know the answer, I just don't know how to make the decision.
And so as the coach or the leader,
Yeah,
we're not necessarily the destination. We're the bridge,
we're the bridge.
right?
Absolutely.
And so and I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's right.
Right? And I'm thinking we often want to have a solution for every problem. And what I love, and the reason I'm leading you down this path is it's not so much that we're trying to tell people, hey, if you want to learn to be a great coach, as we said earlier, great coaches need to be effective leaders. Effective leaders are those that can inspire others and that can listen and take the conversation where it needs to go and not where you think it has to be, right? And so it's a matter of, I don't have the answers, but you might. And my goal here is to bridge between your unknowing and knowing, between your ignorance and between your self-awareness. And so I think, when you take it now to a leader, if you're whether this is a role that you have in an organization or whether it's your role in your household or whether it's a role in the community, a great leader will be someone who can help facilitate the journey to get to the answer.
I believe that.
But not necessarily hand us the answer over, right?
I believe that. But there are moments, and I would say there are rare moments where as a leader and as a coach, there are opportunities to actually give the answer, right? You talked about being a bridge. Sometimes, you have the bridge there, but there's a plank missing. So sometimes as an experienced person, as an experienced executive, as an experienced person in life, you do have that missing plank. But then how you give that answer is very important. You want to ask permission to give the answer. To give somebody the answer when they're not looking for an answer, we see that happening in our personal lives. How many times has your spouse come to you with a problem, you provide a solution, and you make them even more upset than they were because they weren't looking for an answer? So you have to know when is appropriate to provide an answer, and you have to ask permission to provide that answer. But it is the role of a leader sometimes and a coach sometimes to provide an answer in the right circumstances.
So is this like teaching me to fish or giving me the rod? Or giving me the fish?
It's both. Like it's a continuum, right? You have to be able to know, when am I being a real coach and when am I being a teacher or an expert that has the answer? That's, I think, where EQ comes in, right? That's where EQ comes in, is knowing what role you're wearing, what hat you're wearing at that particular moment. And then where the vulnerability comes in is recognizing that sometimes you might get it wrong and being able to kind of recover from that.
And see, this is where I call this the Unfiltered podcast, because it looks at leaders who are not afraid to embrace that vulnerability, who are not afraid to say, I don't have all the answers for you. As leaders, traditional leadership is, I've got all the answers, I've got all the solutions, I've got all the steps. All you have to do is just listen and do as I say. And, emotionally intelligent leaders are those that are going to weigh out the options, listen to the possibilities, listen to the input. You let people weigh in, they will buy in. And I think that's difficult in today's leadership. We are looking for leaders who can guide us through the uncertainty. We want some of those answers, kind of like what you're saying. Sometimes you need the answer. Yeah. But we don't have a crystal ball. So how do you give that answer knowing that I don't know, maybe this is my best attempt? How do you do that?
Absolutely. Well, I would say that if all else being equal and I had to choose, if somebody came and told me, God came and said, you can have one skill. You can either have all the answers, or I can give you the gift of being able to know the perfect question to ask. I would pick the perfect question, because having all the answers is limiting. But knowing the perfect question to ask, the curiosity, the ability to get other people to think and share and provide knowledge, that's powerful.
That's maybe a million answers, million possibilities.
Exactly right. One answer is one possibility.
Right.
A question is multiple possibilities.
And let's take a word that's bastardized these days, empowerment. Right now, apply the scenario that you just gave. If I'm the leader that has the answers, So if, God is giving you the answers or the perfect question, if you practice having the answers all the time, you rarely empower. However, if you're asking the right questions, enabling them to think for themselves and to figure out what would be the best approach, you're growing that leader. And when you look at in an organization where you need to grow that leader, you need to, prune them to become the person who's next in command, so to speak, right? The person who's going to serve others, right? Yeah. You want to give them the skills. And I think this is now the great coach coming in as a leader. So, while coaches or while leaders don't necessarily have to be coaches, they have to have great coaching skills. Yeah. And that's something that we overlook in leadership. We tend to think, again, just watch me and do. Yeah. It's great if you can role model, but most of the time you're role playing, you're not giving the answers because people don't see you walk the walk and talk the talk. You turn away and then you don't do what you just talked about, right?
Absolutely. And I have to say that that's something I learned over time. By the way, I wasn't born with that perspective and viewpoint. I remember very clearly, maybe 15 years ago, when I was promoted to a role where I went from being an individual contributor to actually being a manager. And my vice president said to me, okay, you're going from a position of being the one to go into the board meeting or the boardroom with the senior management team meeting and giving them the answer. So now you're the one that's job it is to stimulate other people to come up with the answer and help them be the ones to tell the story and share the story and pick them up when they fall down and give them credit when they succeed. That's the shift in the role. And whether you're a leader or a coach, it's the same thing. It's the helping other people be successful as opposed to being the one that's successful themselves.
Well, in grade 6 or grade 5, my grade 5 teacher would make me read a dictionary when I was bad in class, right? I did something that required discipline. Well, I thank him for that because I learned so many new words. And if I could apply some of the learnings that you're sharing with me today, I'm reading it, the definitions that I see beside leadership. It is a very diverse definition, but the way you describe it, I'm learning that it's seldom about how we define it. And it's how we encourage and enable others to define leadership and how we invite them to grow and facilitate that growth.
It's true. But, there's one thing I would say that I think is really important and maybe lacking in the world right now is an emphasis on character-based leadership, leader character. And when I talk about leader character, it's the balance between drive, courage, accountability, having the answers, and empathy, nurturing, humility, humanity, temperance. And today, it's clear that leaders need both. And so sometimes what I see out there is leaders that overemphasize one side or the other. So if you have leaders that are very strong on the empathy, the nurturing, the humanity, but not so strong on the drive and the accountability, you have a really nice person that isn't able to move the team forward. But if you have people that are too high on the drive, the accountability, and the courage, you've got sometimes some decisions that are made that are actually not good for people or society. And so you can't have too much of one or the other. You actually need a balance in both. And so I don't want to say there's a right answer to leadership, but there is an important requirement for balanced leadership character. And I think that's really
important. How do we get there? So, and with the idea of balance, I do see this tug of war trying to, and recently I've learned another way to refer to as maybe more of an integration is how do we manage to weigh out when I need to be more of this and less of that. And conversely, sometimes I need to be more of this and more of that. People sometimes see these skill sets as definite and limiting, and they don't realize today or in this particular situation, you're expected to be more of this.
Yeah.
Later, you need to be something different. So, situation leadership is talking about that flexing and integration and balance, however you want to refer to it, right? So maybe you can bring in I believe it's Buddha and Hercules.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's very similar to the Hercules and Buddha example, and I don't take any credit for this. It's a construct of a professor that I work with at Ivy, Dr. Martha Mesnevsky, who's developed a really nice model of the balance required in leadership right now. Is where Hercules meets Buddha. And I'll really simply and quickly, the idea that Hercules, right, strong figure in history,
very visible,
right, but a very good leader, right? But a leader that's driven, a leader that knew the answer, a leader that was able to direct people and was all about performance measures and achieving outcomes. And then you have Buddha, which is around allowing mistakes, reflection, contemplation, empathy. And it's like the leader character. There's times for Hercules and there's times for Buddha. And so leaders today actually need to be both. And so I remember doing a session. I was doing a session with some leaders. And one of the questions we were asking them is, what are you Hercules about? And what are you Buddha about? And this was around the time of the pandemic, before the George Floyd situation happened. And at that time, I need to be Herculean about the safety and health of my people. We have to be diligent. We have to make sure that people are following the rules, because it's about safety and protection of people, both our employees and our customers. But what I have to be Buddha about is recognizing that different people are facing this time in different ways. Some people are loving working from home. Bring it on. Give me more work. I can take it. While other people have children and can't work from home, or having a difficult time working from home and balancing the hours of the day. And so the Buddha part is recognizing you have to meet people where they are and be empathetic and understanding. But everybody's got to be safe, and no exceptions. You have to wear your mask when you go in public. You have to stay home if you can. Wash your hands, right? Those kinds of things. So that's one example of Hercules meets Buddha, but every situation has a different thing, right? For me, when there's normal time, there's no crisis. My Hercules is focus on the needs of the customer. Understand what they care about. Make sure we're delivering value to the customer. I would never compromise that. But where I'm going to be more Buddha about is take some risks. It's okay if you get the wrong answer. It's okay if you make a mistake. But I'm going to ask you what you learned from that, right? So that's just to give an illustration of, you do need both of those, right? And it'll be different for different people.
And so if for a leader, for a coach, some of these traits or the skills that we need to build in others is this ability to find the integration or the balance, and the ability to be Buddha in certain times and Herculean in other times. It's not one or the other. It's a matter, and that comes back to the self-awareness. But also, like you said, it's also knowing what the client wants. So it's awareness of others. Yeah. And it's an ongoing learning process. You don't just wake up one day and say, I got it, I'm Buddha and Hercules, right? It's ongoing, and it's based on the situation. And I love the way you mentioned that, pre-COVID, I would have been more Herculean, right? And then, or pre-George Floyd, right? So, because we look around us, not only in our homes or in our workplaces, we look at the trends. Leaders are at the forefront of making the right decision and being able to own up if they've made the wrong decision.
Right.
And we'll do that. And I think, post George Floyd, where we've seen some much needed change in discussions and the amplification of voices that have been silenced for way too long, those discussions started happening because people were owning up and recognizing I've been sitting on the fence or ignore. I mean, help me out again. I'm forgetting the doing the what's
Knowing the knowing doing gap.
the knowing doing. I know this, but it's easy to just overlook, right?
Yeah.
It's not painful enough.
Yeah.
But it's got to be painful enough.
Yeah.
COVID has made things painful enough.
Absolutely.
The Black Lives Movement pushing us into the streets when we've been isolating for months is painful enough.
Absolutely.
And I think, leaders have to incorporate these discussions and these activities. It's not just about reading a book. It's about putting the learning into practice.
Absolutely.
We have to incorporate that and some of the, the things that we have to become known for as leaders. Otherwise, we're going to be pacifist and passive and sit back and watch others do the work for us. Absolutely. And that's not leadership.
And I want to point out, you said something that's, I think, so important, what you just said, and I want to make sure that we cover it. It's not just reading a book, but it's then doing it. And it's not just doing it, but it's then reflecting on how it went.
Right.
The best way to close the knowing doing gap is to check with yourself. What did I do today that demonstrates what I know is right? Or what didn't I do today that I should have because I know it's right?
Right.
And that comes from reflection. And that's how it comes full circle, right? Is making sure that you are learning, doing, reflecting.
Right. And I'm going to take it to a spiral. Now I'm going to remember this. The knowing doing is about being able to learn something new because you did something different. So I may have known something, but I'm going to spiral to new areas of knowledge because I dare to do something differently. Absolutely. And I know something different now. So my new knowing today will allow me to do a new doing. Yeah. And it's that constant growth. So I have no excuse to sit back and say somebody else can do this.
Yeah.
And I have no excuse to ignore it and think that it'll fix itself on its own. Leadership is about being accountable and being responsible and knowing that it starts with me, but it's never about me. So here's where I ask, my guests, what is one piece of advice, unfiltered advice, no filters, raw, authentic. There's one unfiltered advice that I can use for the thought of the week. And what that is I share a thought of the week with my listeners and on my social media. And I say, hey, what's one thing that you can do or you can tell others to become a better person, a better leader, a better human being? So Shakeel, what is something you can tell our listeners that they can do to start becoming a better version of themselves?
There are a number of things I could draw on, but I'll just pick one. I want to address the topic of candor. Because you're talking about being unfiltered, sometimes we are afraid of being candid in giving feedback or saying things to other people that they need to hear because we feel like we need to be filtered. And so one thing that I think people could do a better job of is when they have some feedback to give to somebody that might be difficult, you have a choice to make. I can sweep it under the rug, or I can tell them. When you sweep it under the rug, you're doing a tremendous disservice to the other person. You're taking away the opportunity they have to grow and change. But at the same time, if you give it to them directly, without the intent to help them, but instead the intent to get it off your chest, you're also not helping them because you're going to get a reaction from them that's like, you keep picking on me. So I think we'll all be a much better society if we get comfortable telling people the truth with what they need to hear, but doing it in a way that's kind and in their service. That would be my thought for the week.
Thank you. And, we say the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
And the way you've positioned that, the way you've shared it, to be kind, and that's how we find freedom. It's liberating to tell you the truth, but to do it in a way that I'm building you up, I'm helping you become better, and I have good intention for your own good. It's not about my own selfish interests. So
Exactly right.
thank you for helping me grow and to spiral to new areas of learning and to challenge myself that knowing has to go beyond doing, that it's I've got to do more. I've got to learn more, because knowing doing is not good enough. It shouldn't be good enough for anybody, leadership, coaching, just anyone. We got to do things much better. And I hope that we apply that, because we are, as we started saying, we are at a crossroads, or we find ourselves in a pond where someone or some great force has thrown a stone and it's caused many ripples. And those ripples were difficult for us to be able to react to, right? We almost feel like they pushed us under, pulling us under, or, but those ripples can help us grow. Yeah. And I can see leadership, the best leaders right now, whether in government or in places of employment or workplaces, those leaders that are being celebrated are the ones that are reacting responsibly and with accountability of thinking, how do we come out together? And, hashtag stronger together is all about how we do that. So thank you for calling that out today. Thank you for being my guest, and stay the unfiltered leader that you are. And I look forward to future communications with you. Thank you. Blessings to you.
Thank you for the service you're providing with this podcast. It's important work. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you very much. All the best to you.
Take care.
Click
Bye-bye.
subscribe, share it, and tell a friend about it. And don't forget to leave a rating.